The stars looked cold and distant through the bridge windows of the warship Thunderstrike. Commander Taman stood with his hands behind his back, watching the empty space ahead. His dark uniform was perfectly pressed, and his face showed no emotion. But inside, his heart was beating fast. Today would be the day they killed the last dragon in the galaxy. For 200 years, the great space dragons had terrorized every world, every ship, every living being in known space. These monsters were bigger than small moons and could tear holes in space itself. They appeared without warning, destroyed entire star systems, and vanished back into the dark void between stars. But now only one remained. Intelligence reports called it the Remnant. It was hiding in the asteroid belt of System X-47, a dead solar system with no planets worth saving, the perfect place for a final battle. Taman turned to face his bridge crew. Every officer looked tense but ready. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the gentle beep of sensors scanning space. "Status report," Taman said in his calm command voice. Lieutenant Hyunwoo checked his console. "All weapon systems ready, sir. Quantum torpedoes loaded. Gravitational disruptors charging. Communications active," reported Ensign Jaiwan from her station. "We have contact with all Allied vessels." Taman nodded. This was not just his ship hunting the dragon. 3 different fleets had come together for this final mission. The Corvin fleet, which he commanded. The Terran Defense Force with their advanced human technology, and the powerful Centauri coalition with their massive battlecruisers. Captain Minji appeared on the main screen. Her Terran ship Defiant was positioned 2 kilometers away. She looked tired but determined. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight military style and her green eyes were serious. "Commander Taman," she said through the communication link. "My sensors show the dragon is definitely in the asteroid field. It's not moving much. Maybe it's sleeping." "Dragons don't sleep," came another voice. Admiral Kyung-ho's face appeared. In a second window on the screen, his Centauri flagship Mountain was the biggest ship in the combined fleet. The old admiral had fought dragons before and survived. His gray hair and scarred face told stories of many battles. "They wait. They plan. They strike when you think you're safe." Taman studied the tactical display showing all their ships. 15 warships total. The most powerful fleet ever assembled. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Together they should be able to kill one dragon. Should be. "Lieutenant So-young," Taman called to his tactical officer. She was young, but brilliant. She had studied dragon behavior for years and knew their attack patterns better than anyone. "Yes, sir," So-young replied. She looked up from her computer screen where she was analyzing sensor data. "What do you think? Is it really sleeping?" So-young frowned and looked at her readings again. "The energy patterns are strange, sir. Lower than normal. But dragons are tricky. It could be a trap." Before Taman could respond, his communications officer spoke up. "Sir, we have an unidentified ship approaching the system." "What?" Admiral Kyung-ho's voice boomed through the speakers. All civilian traffic was supposed to be cleared from this area. The main screen changed to show a smaller ship moving toward them. It was white and blue, with peaceful markings on its hull. Not a warship. "This is the research vessel New Seoul," came a calm voice over the radio. "Captain Donghyun speaking. We are here to conduct xenobiology studies under Galactic Research Permit 7742. Taman felt his jaw tighten. A research ship. Here, now. During the most important military operation in galactic history. Captain Minji looked annoyed on her screen. "Captain Donghyun, this is an active combat zone. You need to leave immediately." "I'm afraid we can't do that," Captain Donghyun replied politely. "Our research permit is valid, and under Interspecies Law Article 15, civilian research has the right to continue in neutral space as long as we maintain safe distance from military operations." Admiral Kyung-ho's face turned red. "Safe distance? There's no safe distance when fighting a dragon. That thing could destroy your entire ship in seconds." Taman studied the research vessel on his screen. It was much smaller than any of the warships. Maybe 50 people on board. Why would they risk their lives to study anything in a system with a dragon? Captain Dong-hyun, Taemin said into his microphone. What exactly are you planning to study here? There was a pause. Then Dong-hyun's voice came back, sounding careful. We're interested in dragon biology and behavior. This may be our last chance to observe one of these creatures before they're extinct. They're extinct for a good reason, Admiral Kyung-ho growled. They're killers. Lieutenant So-young looked up from her station. Sir, the research ship is maintaining position 5 kilometers away. That's technically outside our combat perimeter. Taemin made a decision he would question many times later. Let them stay. But if the dragon makes any aggressive move toward them, they leave immediately. Understood, Commander, Captain Dong-hyun replied. We'll monitor your communications and move to minimum safe distance if combat begins. Admiral Kyung-ho did not look happy, but he said nothing more. Captain Minji just shook her head. Inside the research vessel New Seoul, Dr. Ji-hoon was looking at his sensor readings with great interest. He was the lead xenobiologist on the mission, a quiet man with curious eyes who had spent his life studying alien life forms. His partner, Dr. Nari, was setting up long-range scanners to observe the dragon from a distance. Ji-hoon, Dr. Nari said softly. Look at these energy readings. Ji-hoon moved to her station and studied the data. His eyes widened. The dragon's energy patterns were not what he expected. They were complex, organized, almost like communication. Signals, he whispered. Dr. Nari nodded. That's what I thought too. But who would a dragon be trying to communicate with? Back on the Thunderstrike, Commander Taemin was making final preparations. The 3 fleet commanders had agreed on their battle plan. They would surround the asteroid field, force the dragon into open space, and hit it with everything they had. All ships, this is Commander Taemin, he announced on the fleet communication channel. Operation Dragon's End begins in 10 minutes. Remember, this creature has destroyed thousands of worlds and killed billions of people. Today we finish what our ancestors started. Today we make the galaxy safe. The bridge crew began their final weapon checks. Lieutenant Hyunwoo armed the torpedo tubes. Ensign Ji-won opened communication channels to all ships. Lieutenant So-young studied the dragon's position and planned their attack vectors. But 5 kilometers away on the New Seoul, Dr. Ji-hoon was making a discovery that would change everything. The dragon's energy signals were not random. They followed patterns, mathematical sequences, harmonic frequencies. The dragon was not sleeping or waiting to attack. It was trying to talk. Captain Dong-hyun, Dr. Ji-hoon called urgently. I need to contact the fleet commanders immediately. I think we're about to make a terrible mistake. The hunt for the last dragon was about to begin. But sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from destroying something, but from trying to understand it first. Dr. Ji-hoon's urgent message never reached the fleet commanders in time. All ships attack. Admiral Kyung-ho's voice boomed across the communication channels. The 3 fleets moved forward like a pack of metal wolves. 15 warships surrounded the asteroid field where the dragon waited, their weapons charged with deadly energy that could crack planets in half. Commander Taemin felt his stomach tighten as he gave the order. Fire quantum torpedoes! Bright streaks of blue light shot through space toward the asteroids. The torpedoes moved faster than anything alive could dodge. They should have hit the dragon and torn it apart in seconds, but they didn't. As the torpedoes got close to the dragon, space itself began to bend and twist. The weapons curved away from their target, like water flowing around a rock. Some torpedoes crashed into asteroids, others spun off into empty space and exploded harmlessly. What happened? Lieutenant Hyunwoo shouted from his weapons station. Direct hit should have been impossible to miss. Lieutenant So-young stared at her tactical screen in shock. It's using gravitational fields to deflect our weapons. I've never seen anything like this. On the Defiant, Captain Minji watched her own torpedoes bend away from the dragon. All ships switched to gravitational disruptors. Maybe we can disrupt whatever it's doing to our weapons. The fleet fired again. This time they used weapons designed to tear apart the fabric of space itself. Purple energy beams cut through the void toward the dragon. The creature finally moved. It was massive beyond imagination, bigger than the largest space station. Its body was dark as the void between stars, but covered in patterns that glowed with soft silver light. It had no wings, but it moved through space like it was swimming through an invisible ocean. As the gravitational disruptors hit, the dragon let out a sound that traveled through space itself. Not a roar of anger or pain. Something else entirely. Something that made Dr. Jihoon on the research ship sit up straight in recognition. "Nari," he called to his research partner. "Are you recording this?" Dr. Nari nodded, her fingers flying over her equipment. Every frequency, every energy pattern. "Jihoon, this sound, it's not random. There's structure to it. Mathematical relationships." The dragon's call echoed through space again, longer this time, more complex. It reached across multiple dimensions, using frequencies that most species couldn't even detect. On the Thunder Strike, the gravitational disruptors had no more effect than the torpedoes. The dragon seemed to absorb the energy and redirect it, creating ripples in spacetime that pushed the attacking ships away. "Sir," Ensign Jiwon called out, "the dragon is responding to our communications frequencies." "What do you mean responding?" Commander Taman demanded. It's sending signals back on the same channels we use for ship-to-ship communication. But I can't understand what it's trying to say." Admiral Kyung-ho's angry face appeared on the screen. "It doesn't matter what it's trying to say. These creatures don't communicate. They destroy all ships, prepare the experimental weapons." Captain Minji looked worried. "Admiral, we haven't tested those weapons in combat. And with a civilian research ship so close, the research ship shouldn't be here," Kyung-ho shouted. "This is war, not science class." But Captain Dong-hyun on the New Seoul had heard everything over the open communication channels. He made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Dr. Jihoon," he said quietly, "can you make sense of what that creature is saying?" Jihoon was already working frantically at his computer, analyzing the dragon's calls. "Captain, I think it's trying to establish mathematical communication. Prime numbers, geometric sequences, the same kind of signals we'd use to contact an unknown alien species. But we already know what dragons are," Dr. Nari said. "They're destroyers. Everyone knows that." "What if everyone is wrong?" Jihoon replied. Captain Dong-hyun looked at his small bridge crew. They were scientists, not soldiers, but they had come, here to learn, and learning meant taking risks. "Move us closer to the dragon," he ordered. "Sir?" his pilot asked in surprise. The military commanders ordered all civilian ships to maintain distance. "I'm changing our orders," Dong-hyun said firmly. "Set course for the asteroid field, but slowly. We don't want to appear threatening." Back on the warships, the military commanders were growing more frustrated by the minute. Nothing they fired at the dragon had any real effect. The creature seemed to be playing with them, deflecting their weapons while continuing its strange calls into space. Commander Taman studied the tactical display. His years of military training told him this was wrong. Dragons were supposed to attack immediately. They were supposed to be mindless destroyers that tore through space fleets like paper. This dragon was doing something else entirely. "Lieutenant Soyoung," he called to his tactical officer. "In all your studies of dragon behavior, have you ever seen anything like this?" Soyoung looked up from her screen, confusion clear on her face. "Never, sir. Every recorded dragon encounter has been immediate violence, but this one, it's almost like it's trying to avoid hurting us." "Dragons don't avoid hurting anything." Admiral Kyung-ho's voice cut in from the communication system. "That's why we're here to kill it." But even as he said it, Kyung-ho noticed something strange. His flagship mountain had moved close enough to the dragon that it should have been attacked by now. Instead, the creature kept its distance, creating defensive barriers but never striking back. Meanwhile, the research ship New Seoul continued its slow approach toward the dragon. As it got closer, something remarkable happened. The dragon's hostile postures began to change. Dr. Jihoon watched in amazement as the creature's energy patterns shifted. The chaotic defensive fields became organized, structured. The random calls became focus signals directed specifically at the research ship. "It knows we're different," he whispered. "It can tell we're not here to attack." "Jihoon," Dr. Nari said urgently. I'm picking up responses to our diplomatic frequencies, standard first contact protocols that every species uses when meeting unknown aliens. Dr. Jihoon's hands shook as he worked on his computer. The dragon was following the same communication rules that civilized species use throughout the galaxy. Prime numbers, mathematical constants, universal physical laws that any intelligent species would understand. Captain Donghyun, he said in a voice full of wonder and fear, this dragon is trying to talk to us, really talk to us. On the military ships, alarms began sounding. Admiral Kyung-ho had made his decision. All ships, prepare to deploy the Void Ripper weapon, he announced. We're going to tear a hole in space-time big enough to destroy that thing once and for all. Captain Minji's face went pale. Admiral, that weapon is experimental. We don't know what it might do to the local space around us. And the research ship. We'll have to take their chances. Kyung-ho finished coldly. But the dragon seemed to sense the change in the fleet's intentions. Its calls became more urgent, more desperate. It began moving toward the new soul, not to attack, but as if seeking protection. Dr. Jihoon realized with growing horror that they were about to witness the destruction of something that might be the most important discovery in galactic history. A creature that everyone thought was a mindless destroyer was actually trying to communicate. And in less than 10 minutes, the combined military fleet was going to kill it. Captain, he said to Donghyun, we have to do something. I think this dragon isn't our enemy. I think it never was. Dr. Jihoon worked faster than he had ever worked in his life. His fingers flew over the communication controls while Dr. Nari monitored the dragon's responses. They had maybe 8 minutes before Admiral Kyung-ho fired the experimental weapon that could destroy everything in the system. There, Jihoon shouted suddenly. I've got it. On his screen, mathematical sequences flowed back and forth between the research ship and the dragon. Prime numbers, followed by more complex equations. The dragon was proving it understood advanced mathematics, physics, even concepts that some galactic species hadn't discovered yet. Captain Donghyun leaned over Jihoon's shoulder. What is it saying? It's trying to tell us who it really is, Jihoon said in amazement. Nari, are you seeing this? Dr. Nari's face had gone completely white. The knowledge patterns it's showing us. Jihoon, I think this creature knows things that our entire civilization has never learned. Through the mathematical language, the dragon began to share its story. Images flowed through the communication link. Not pictures, but direct knowledge that appeared in the scientists' minds like memories. The dragon showed them the truth. Millions of years ago, the creatures humans called dragons had been given a sacred duty by an even older species. They were not destroyers. They were librarians, guardians of knowledge. Each dragon carried within its mind the complete history and wisdom of thousands of civilizations that had lived and died across the galaxy. When a civilization was about to become extinct, the dragons would arrive to preserve their knowledge, their culture, their entire way of understanding the universe. What looked like attacks on star systems were actually desperate rescue missions, trying to save the memory of dying worlds before everything was lost forever. This is incredible, Dr. Jihoon whispered. The dragons weren't destroying civilizations. They were trying to save them. But the knowledge transfer was making him dizzy. The dragon's mind was so vast, so ancient, that even a small sharing of information was almost too much for a human brain to handle. On the warships, time was running out. Void Ripper charging to 50%, Admiral Kyung-ho announced. All ships moved to safe distance. Commander Taemin felt something was terribly wrong, but his military training told him to follow orders. Thunderstrike moving to firing position, he reported. But Lieutenant So-young was listening to the communication between the research ship and the dragon. As a specialist in dragon behavior, she had access to all communication channels. What she heard made her heart race. Sir, she said quietly to Commander Taemin, I think you need to hear this. She played the mathematical conversations over the bridge speakers. Even without understanding the complex language, everyone could hear that this was intelligent communication. Two minds talking to each other, learning from each other. Ensign Jiwan looked up from her station with wide eyes. Sir, that sounds like diplomatic contact protocols, like when two civilizations meet for the first time. Commander Taman stared at his communication screen. Everything he had been taught about dragons was being challenged by what he was hearing. On the Defiant, Captain Minji was having the same realization. All ships, this is Captain Minji. I recommend we hold fire until we understand what's happening with the research vessel. Negative! Admiral Kyung-ho's voice crackled with anger. We have our orders. That dragon dies today, no matter what. But, back on the New Sol, Dr. Jihoon was learning things that could change the entire galaxy. The dragon, who called itself something that translated roughly to Keeper of the Lost, was the last of its kind. It had been alone for 300 years, carrying the memories of over 10,000 extinct civilizations. The weight of all that knowledge, all that loneliness, had driven it to hide in empty systems like this one. It had been waiting for a species mature enough to understand what the dragons really were, a species that could take over their role as guardians of galactic memory. It's been looking for us, Jihoon said to Captain Donghyun. Not humans specifically, but any species, capable of carrying this responsibility. The dragon shared more images, technologies that could provide clean energy for entire star systems, medical knowledge that could cure diseases and extend life, scientific discoveries that could allow faster travel between stars without damaging space itself. Dr. Nari was recording everything, but she looked overwhelmed. Jihoon, this creature knows how to fix every major problem our civilization faces. Resource shortages, environmental damage, even how to prevent wars through better communication. Why? Captain Donghyun asked the dragon through the communication link. Why share this with us? The answer came not in words but in feelings transmitted directly through the link. Loneliness. Hope. The desperate desire to find someone who could understand. The dragon had been carrying the wisdom of 10,000 civilizations for centuries with no one to share it with. But it was more than just sharing knowledge. The dragon was offering something incredible. It wants to make me a guardian, Jihoon said in shock. It's offering to transfer all of its knowledge to me, to make me the next Keeper of the Lost. What would that mean? Dr. Nari asked. The dragon showed him. His consciousness would be linked to the vast network of stored civilizations. His lifespan would be extended to match that of the dragons. He would become responsible for preserving the knowledge of any civilization that was about to disappear. It was the most important job in the galaxy, and the most lonely. Void Ripper at 75% charge, Admiral Kyung-ho announced. 30 seconds to firing. Captain Donghyun made a decision that would define the rest of his life. All power to shields. Position us between the dragon and the fleet. Captain, his pilot asked in shock. That will put us directly in the line of fire. I know, Donghyun said quietly. But I won't let them destroy something this important because they're too afraid to understand it. Dr. Jihoon looked at the captain with new respect. Sir, if I accept the dragon's offer, the knowledge transfer will take several minutes. We'll need protection during the process. You'll have it, Donghyun promised. But Dr. Jihoon hesitated. Accepting the dragon's knowledge would change him forever. He would gain incredible wisdom, but he would also become responsible for preserving the memory of every civilization that might die in the future. It was a burden that had driven the dragons to hide in empty space for centuries. On the Thunder Strike, Lieutenant So-young made a choice that could end her military career. She opened a channel to Galactic Command and transmitted everything she had recorded of the dragon's communications. This is Lieutenant So-young of the Corvin Fleet, she said into her microphone. I am requesting immediate reassessment of the Dragon Extermination Protocol. We have evidence that these creatures are not hostile. Commander Taman heard her transmission and realized his tactical officer was risking everything to do what she thought was right. Void Ripper at 90%, Admiral Kyung-ho announced. 10 seconds to firing. The dragon seemed to sense what was about to happen. It moved closer to the New Sol, not for protection, but to begin the knowledge transfer with Dr. Jihoon before it was too late. Jihoon, the dragon's voice spoke directly into his mind for the first time. If you are willing, we must begin now. There may not be another chance. Dr. Jihoon looked around the bridge of the New Seoul. Captain Donghyun nodded at him with trust and respect. Dr. Nari squeezed his shoulder supportively. The entire crew was putting their lives at risk to protect this moment of first contact. "I accept," Jihoon said aloud. The knowledge transfer began just as Admiral Kyung-ho fired the experimental weapon that could destroy them all. The Void Ripper weapon fired with a sound like reality tearing apart. Purple energy cut through space toward the research ship New Seoul and the dragon behind it. But as the deadly beam approached, something impossible happened. Dr. Jihoon, his mind now partially connected to the dragon's vast consciousness, felt knowledge flowing into him like water into a dry riverbed, and with that knowledge came power he had never imagined. The dragon's mastery of space and time was not magic. It was science so advanced that it seemed like magic to younger species. As Jihoon's consciousness merged with the ancient creature's knowledge, he instinctively understood how to bend space itself. The Void Ripper beam, designed to tear holes in the fabric of reality, met a barrier created by the combined will of human intuition and dragon wisdom. The weapon's energy scattered harmlessly into multiple dimensions. Admiral Kyung-ho stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Impossible. That weapon can destroy entire moons. But on the New Seoul, Dr. Jihoon was experiencing something far more profound than deflecting weapons. The dragon's memories were becoming his memories. He saw the birth and death of stars. He witnessed civilizations rising from primitive tribes to galaxy-spanning empires, then fading into extinction. He felt the terrible loneliness of the dragons, carrying the weight of all that lost knowledge with no one to share it with. "The burden is heavy," the dragon's voice spoke in his mind. "Are you certain you wish to carry it?" Jihoon saw what his life would become. Centuries of existence, watching civilizations grow and die while preserving their memory. The responsibility of deciding which cultures were worth saving, which knowledge was most important to preserve. But he also saw the alternative. If the dragons died out completely, all that accumulated wisdom would be lost forever. 10,000. Civilizations would be forgotten as if they had never existed. "I'm certain," he said aloud. Captain Donghyun watched his chief scientist change before his eyes. Jihoon's face took on an expression of deep wisdom and ancient sadness. When he looked up, his eyes held depths that had not been there before. "The transfer is working," Dr. Nari said in amazement, watching her instruments. "But Captain, I'm picking up communications from the fleet. They're arguing among themselves." She was right. The failure of their ultimate weapon had created chaos among the military commanders. On the Thunderstrike, Lieutenant So-young's transmission to Galactic Command had reached the right people. Her communication screen showed the face of Admiral Lar Yongsu, head of the Galactic Science Council. "Commander Taemin," Admiral Yongsu said urgently, "I need you to hold your fire immediately. We're sending a diplomatic team to your location." But Admiral Kyung-ho's face appeared on another screen, red with fury. "You don't have authority over this operation. That dragon dies today." Commander Taemin found himself caught between competing orders from his superiors. His military training said to follow the chain of command, but everything he was seeing suggested they might be making the biggest mistake in galactic history. "Captain," Minji made the choice for him. "Thunderstrike, Defiant, and all ships under Terran command are standing down," she announced. "We will not fire on the dragon or the research vessel until we understand what's happening." "Mutiny," Admiral Kyung-ho shouted. "I'll have you all court-martialed." But Lieutenant So-young had more news. "Sir, I'm receiving responses from the Centauri Coalition government. They're ordering a full review of the Dragon Extermination Protocol. The political situation was changing rapidly as word spread throughout the galaxy. The recordings of the Dragon's communications were being analyzed by scientists on dozens of worlds. For the first time in centuries, people were questioning whether the Dragons had really been enemies. Meanwhile, the knowledge transfer continued on the New Seoul. Dr. Jihoon experienced memories that were not his own. He saw through the eyes of creatures that had lived millions of years ago. He learned languages that had been dead for longer than humans had existed. He gained understanding of scientific principles that his species would not discover for thousands of years. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The dragons were not always guardians, the creature's voice explained in his mind. Long ago, we were a young species, much like yours. We accepted this responsibility from an even older race that was preparing to leave this galaxy. Jihoon saw the truth in the dragon's memories. The current guardians were part of an endless chain stretching back millions of years. Each species that became advanced enough would eventually take on the role of preserving knowledge for those who came after. It is the natural progression of intelligent life, the dragon continued, to grow beyond the need for physical existence and become keepers of wisdom instead. Dr. Nari, monitoring the process, saw something wonderful happening. The dragon's wounds, both physical and emotional, were beginning to heal. For the first time in centuries, the ancient creature was not alone. Jihoon, she said softly, your brain patterns are changing. You're becoming something new. Still human, but more than human. Captain Dong-hyun watched his friend transform into something unprecedented in galactic history. The first human dragon guardian. A bridge between species that had been enemies for centuries. But Admiral Kyung-ho was not finished. If the Void Ripper won't work, he announced to his remaining ships, we'll use conventional weapons. Concentrated fire from all remaining vessels. Several Centauri ships began charging their weapons, preparing for a massive bombardment that would destroy the research ship along with the dragon. Commander Taemin had to choose. Follow his admiral's orders, or protect what might be the most important discovery in galactic history. Lieutenant So-young made the choice easier. Sir, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the dragon, but it's not preparing to attack. It's creating some kind of protective field around the research ship. The dragon was using the last of its strength to shield the humans who had shown it kindness. After centuries of being hunted, it had finally found beings who tried to understand, rather than destroy. All ships, this is Commander Taemin, he said into his communicator. I am ordering the Thunderstrike to protect the research vessel. Any ship that fires on civilians will answer to me personally. Several other commanders followed his lead. The fleet was dividing along lines of conscience rather than nationality. Captain Minji positioned the Defiant between Admiral Kyung-ho's remaining ships and the New Seoul. Admiral, if you want to fire on that research ship, you'll have to go through us first. On the research vessel, the knowledge transfer was nearly complete. Dr. Jihoon now carried within his mind the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 civilizations. He understood technologies that could solve every major problem facing the galaxy. But more importantly, he had gained something the dragon had lost long ago. Hope. We don't have to do this alone anymore, Jihoon said to the dragon. Humans are good at working together. We can share this responsibility among many people instead of placing it all on one. The dragon's ancient loneliness began to lift for the first time in centuries. Perhaps this young species could find a better way to preserve galactic knowledge. Perhaps the age of solitary guardians was finally ending. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. Admiral Kyung-ho, now commanding only 3 ships but determined to complete his mission, gave the final order. All remaining vessels, fire everything you have. Destroy that dragon and anyone who protects it. Admiral Kyung-ho's remaining ships opened fire with every weapon they had. Quantum torpedoes, plasma cannons, and gravitational disruptors all streaked through space toward the New Seoul and the dragon. It was enough firepower to destroy a small planet. But Dr. Jihoon was no longer entirely human. The knowledge transfer had created something new in galactic history. His human intuition and creativity were now connected to the dragon's mastery of space and time. Together, they were more powerful than either could be alone. Jihoon raised his hand and space itself responded to his will. The incoming weapons slowed, stopped, and gently redirected away from their targets. The deadly energy beams curved through empty space and dissipated harmlessly. Impossible, Admiral Kyung-ho whispered, staring at his tactical display. But Captain Minji understood what she was seeing. It's not just the dragon anymore. The human and the dragon are working together. They're connected somehow. She was right. The bond between Jihoon and the dragon, who now asked to be called Keeper, was unlike anything that had existed before. The dragon's ancient wisdom guided Jihoon's actions, while his human perspective gave the dragon new hope and purpose. "I can feel its thoughts," Jihoon said to Dr. Nari in wonder. "And it can feel mine. We're not the same being, but we're linked, partners." Keeper's voice spoke in his mind with warmth that had been absent for centuries. "For the first time in 300 years, I am not alone. Thank you, young guardian." Captain Dong-Yun watched in amazement as the dragon moved closer to their ship, not as a threat but as a friend seeking companionship. The creature's silver patterns glowed brighter, showing contentment instead of the pain and loneliness they had displayed before. "Jihoon," Dong-Yun said carefully, "what happens now? You're connected to that creature, but you're still human. How do we explain this to the galaxy?" Before Jihoon could answer, Lieutenant So-Young's voice crackled over the communication system from the Thunderstrike. "All ships, this is Lieutenant So-Young. I have urgent news from Galactic Command. A coalition of species is en route to this system. They want to evaluate the situation personally before any more action is taken." Admiral Kyung-ho's face appeared on the main screen, twisted with frustration and anger. "I don't care what the politicians want. My orders are to eliminate that dragon, and I will complete this mission." But his remaining ships were no longer following his commands. The crews had seen their weapons fail against the combined power of human and dragon working together. More importantly, they had heard the communications proving that dragons might not be the monsters they had always believed. Commander Taemin's voice came over the fleet communication channel. "Admiral Kyung-ho, I am relieving you of command. Your actions are putting civilians at risk and potentially preventing the most important first contact in galactic history." "You can't do that," Kyung-ho shouted. "Actually, he can," Captain Minji added. "Under Galactic Military Code Section 12, any officer can relieve a superior who is acting against the greater good of the galaxy. I support Commander Taemin's action." One by one, the other ship commanders agreed. Admiral Kyung-ho found himself alone, his authority stripped away by officers who chose conscience over blind obedience. On the new Sol, the knowledge transfer was finally complete. Dr. Jihoon now carried within his mind the complete history and wisdom of 10,000 civilizations. He knew how to cure diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. He understood technologies that could provide clean energy for every world. He possessed scientific knowledge that could advance galactic civilization by thousands of years, but the most precious thing he had gained was friendship with an ancient being who had carried this burden alone for too long. "Keeper," he said aloud, knowing the dragon could hear his thoughts. "We need to share this knowledge with the galaxy, but carefully. Some species might not be ready for all of it at once." The dragon's response filled his mind with approval and relief. "Yes, young guardian, that is wisdom. Knowledge shared too quickly can destroy civilizations as surely as knowledge lost forever." Dr. Nari was recording everything, documenting the first successful human-dragon communication in galactic history. But she noticed something else happening. "Jihoon, your life signs are changing. Your cellular structure is adapting. The dragon's knowledge is actually changing your biology." Jihoon felt it too. His body was becoming more resilient, his lifespan extending to match his new responsibilities. He was still human in every way that mattered, but enhanced to carry the burden of galactic memory. Captain Dong-Yun made an announcement to the fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Dong-Yun of the New Sol. We have successfully established peaceful contact with the dragon. I repeat, the dragon is not hostile. It is a guardian of knowledge, and it has shared some of that knowledge with my crew." To prove his point, Jihoon shared one small piece of dragon wisdom with the fleet: instructions for a medical device that could heal injuries that were currently considered incurable. Within minutes, ship doctors throughout the fleet were confirming that the knowledge was genuine and revolutionary. But the most important change was happening inside Keeper itself. For 3 centuries, the dragon had been slowly dying from loneliness and despair. The weight of preserving 10,000 civilizations with no one to share the burden had been crushing its spirit. Now, with Jihoon as a partner and friend, Keeper began to heal. Its wounds closed, its energy returned. The silver patterns on its dark scales glowed with new life and hope. I had forgotten what friendship felt like. Keeper's voice whispered in Jihoon's mind. You have given me something more valuable than all the knowledge in the galaxy. Dr. Jihoon felt tears on his cheeks. Through their mental link, he could feel the dragon's joy and gratitude, but he could also feel the enormous responsibility they now shared. We're going to change how this works, he said aloud, speaking to both Keeper and the humans around him. No more solitary guardians carrying this burden alone. We'll create a new system. Multiple species working together to preserve galactic knowledge. Captain Dongyun smiled. The first interspecies archive, with a human and a dragon as co-directors. Before anyone could respond, new ships appeared on the edge of the system. Not military vessels, but diplomatic ships from dozens of different species. The coalition that Lieutenant Soyoung had mentioned was arriving to witness this historic first contact. Among them was Admiral Yong-Su of the Galactic Science Council, along with representatives from the Centauri Coalition, the Terran Federation, and species that had never worked together before. Admiral Kyung-ho, still commanding his single remaining ship, made one final desperate attempt to complete his original mission. He powered up his weapons and aimed directly at the new soul. But Keeper was no longer a creature driven by loneliness and pain. With Jihoon as a partner, the dragon had regained its full power and purpose. Without violence, without anger, Keeper simply disabled Kyung-ho's ship. The weapons powered down, the engines stopped, and the life support systems switched to backup power. The Admiral and his crew were safe, but their ability to cause harm was gone. The time for hunting is over, Jihoon said, his voice somehow carrying across all communication channels in the system. Now we begin the time of learning. As the diplomatic ships approached, both Jihoon and Keeper felt something they had never expected. They felt hope for the future of the galaxy. 6 months after the failed dragon hunt, the galaxy was a different place. Dr. Jihoon stood on the observation deck of the newly built archive station, watching ships from dozens of species arriving and departing. Each vessel carried knowledge, to be preserved or wisdom to be shared with civilizations that needed it. Beside him, visible through the massive transparent walls, Keeper floated peacefully in space. The dragon's wounds had completely healed, and its silver patterns now glowed with contentment instead of pain. Another delegation from the Outer Rim systems, Dr. Nari said, as she joined Jihoon at the observation window. They want to learn about the water purification technology we recovered from the Altarian archives. Jihoon nodded. The knowledge stored in Keeper's memory was saving lives across the galaxy, medical advances that could cure genetic diseases, agricultural techniques that could feed starving worlds, energy technologies that didn't damage the environment, but they were sharing it carefully, working with each species to make sure they could handle the new knowledge responsibly. How are you feeling? Dr. Nari asked. It was a question she asked every day, concerned about how the transformation had affected her research partner. Different, Jihoon admitted, but still me. Still human, just with a much longer perspective on things. The bond with Keeper had changed him in ways that were still being discovered. His lifespan had been extended to match the dragon's, giving him centuries to carry out his duties as guardian. His mind could process information at speeds that amazed even the galaxy's most advanced computers. But the most important change was that he was no longer alone in his responsibilities. Captain Donghyun entered the observation deck, carrying a data tablet with the day's reports. The Terran Senate has officially approved our request for Archive Station to become neutral territory. No military vessels allowed except for protection duties. Jihoon smiled. Archive Station had become something unique in galactic history. A place where species that had been enemies for centuries worked together to preserve knowledge and culture. Scientists, historians, and diplomats from across the galaxy came here to learn and share. Any word from Lieutenant Soyoung? Jihoon asked. She's been promoted to captain, Donghyun replied with a grin. And she's bringing the first class of students to the Guardian Academy next week. The Guardian Academy was Jihoon's proudest achievement. Instead of having single guardians carry the burden alone for centuries, they were training teams of people from different species to work together. No one would ever have to face the loneliness that had nearly destroyed Keeper. Through the mental link they shared, Ji-hoon felt Keeper's approval and happiness. The dragon had become more than a repository of ancient knowledge. It had become a teacher, sharing wisdom with students who would carry on the Guardian tradition. Commander Taemin had also found a new purpose. After the confrontation with Admiral Kyung-ho, he had resigned from military service and joined the archive station as head of security. His job was to protect the knowledge and the beings who preserved it. Speaking of visitors, Dr. Nari said, pointing out the window, "Isn't that Captain Minji's ship approaching?" Ji-hoon looked and saw the familiar outline of the Defiant moving toward the station's docking bay. Captain Minji had become one of Archive Station's strongest supporters, often bringing representatives from military organizations who wanted to understand the new relationship between humans and dragons. A soft chime sounded through the observation deck, and Keeper's voice spoke directly into Ji-hoon's mind. "The young ones are here for their lesson." Ji-hoon excused himself and made his way to the main archive chamber, a vast room where Keeper could extend part of its consciousness through advanced holographic systems. Today's students were a group of young beings from 5 different species, all training to become junior guardians. Among them was Minji, a young centauri who shared a name with the ship captain. There was also Hyonu, a human teenager whose parents had sent him to learn about galactic responsibility. The group included students from species that had never worked together before. "Today," Ji-hoon said to the gathered students, "Keeper will share with you the story of the Varian civilization. They solved the problem of interspecies communication by developing technology that translates not just words, but emotions and cultural concepts." Keeper's presence filled the room as the dragon began to share memories that were older than some star systems. The students experienced the rise and fall of the Varian civilization, learning not just about their technology, but about their values, their art, their way of understanding the universe. This was how knowledge should be preserved, Ji-hoon thought, not locked away in the mind of a single lonely guardian, but shared and discussed and built upon by many minds working together. After the lesson, he returned to the observation deck where Dr. Nari and Captain Dong-hyun were meeting with Captain Minji, who had just arrived from her ship. "The Galactic Council has made their final decision," Captain Minji announced. "Admiral Kyung-ho has been court-martialed and removed from service. But more importantly, they've officially recognized dragons as sentient beings with full rights, under galactic law." Dr. Nari clapped her hands together in celebration. "That means no one can legally hunt them anymore." "Not that there are any others to hunt," Captain Dong-hyun said sadly. "Keeper really is the last one." Ji-hoon felt a familiar sadness through his mental link with the dragon. The loss of an entire species was a tragedy that could never be fully healed. But through the bond they shared, Keeper was no longer facing that grief alone. "Maybe not forever," Ji-hoon said thoughtfully. "Keeper has shown me some of the dragon's biological and technological knowledge. It might be possible to create new guardians, not exactly dragons, but beings designed specifically for preserving and sharing knowledge." Captain Minji looked intrigued. "You mean create an entire species of guardians?" "Not create a species," Ji-hoon corrected. "Offer the choice to volunteers from existing species. The same transformation that happened to me could be given to others who want to take on this responsibility." It was an idea that had been growing in his mind for weeks. The guardian bond didn't have to be limited to dragons and one human. Other species could join the network, creating a new kind of civilization dedicated to preserving the galaxy's cultural heritage. Through their mental link, Keeper expressed enthusiasm for the idea. The dragon had been alone for too long, and welcomed the possibility of having many friends and partners in the work of guardianship. The Terran government would probably support research into that, Captain Minji said, especially after seeing how much good the dragon knowledge has already done. Dr. Nari was already taking notes on her tablet. "We could start with volunteers from the Guardian Academy, people who have already shown they understand the responsibility." Captain Dong-hyun smiled as he watched ships from different species docking peacefully at Archive Station. 6 months ago, we came here to study dragon biology. Now we're talking about creating a new form of galactic civilization. Jihoon looked out at the stars, feeling Keeper's contentment and hope flowing through their bond. The dragon was no longer the last of its kind. It was the first of something new, a bridge between the ancient guardians and whatever came next. Keeper wants to say something, Jihoon announced to the group. The dragon's voice, translated through their bond, filled the observation deck with warmth and wisdom. For millions of years, the burden of preserving knowledge fell to solitary guardians who carried it alone. Today marks the beginning of a new age, an age where knowledge is shared, where guardianship is a choice made freely, and where no being must face the responsibility of preserving civilization by themselves. The hunt for dragons is over, Keeper continued. Now begins the age of friendship between species, the age of shared wisdom, and the age of hope for all who seek to preserve the best of what intelligent life can achieve. Jihoon felt tears of joy on his cheeks as he translated the dragon's words. Around him, his friends and colleagues smiled with the satisfaction of having been part of something historic. Outside the station, Keeper's silver patterns glowed brighter than they had in centuries, no longer marking loneliness and pain, but celebrating friendship and the promise of a better future. The last dragon hunt had ended not with the death of a creature, but with the birth of a new form of cooperation that would preserve knowledge and wisdom for generations yet to come. And in the vast network of archive stations' computers, the applications to join the Guardian Academy continued to arrive from species across the galaxy, all wanting to be part of this new chapter in galactic history. The age of hunting was over. The age of learning had begun.